Okay. Okay. The next set that the next issue that your book looks at that we've already looked at before is processing instruction. So this is this idea of input, output, input, intake, output. So who can tell me what's the difference between input, intake, and output? Oh, let Tolalupe do it. Yep.
All right. The input talked about the things that the learner is getting from different sources.
All right.
The intake is whatever you decide to take, whatever is taken, like is maybe consciously. So yes, I did get this, and I'm going to. Whatever is going, like his own internal language.
It's good. Whatever is integrated into the interlanguage, good. And what's output? Output. Yeah. Good. Production. Good. Good. So the difference between input and intake is whatever actually makes it into the interlanguage, the learner's interlanguage, and begins to restructure the system. Right. So the question is, how do you increase intake from input? Because I don't know if you have this experience too, but in my classes, I'm often fascinated by what it is that I think I've just taught versus what it is that the students have actually just taken in or not taken in. You know, it's always a fascination to me. And this happens, of course, in language classes as well. You think you just taught, I don't know, pronunciation of third person forms z and is, but then, you know, it turns out that went like that, and, you know, your learner actually picked up, hopefully, something else, but something else entirely. So the idea is the research looks at when it's best to try and get the input to become intake. So in this case, do you just keep giving the input over and over and over again and hope that just by pure sort of, you know, the fact that it's going in there and in there and in there, something will stick? Or do you do something to negotiate, help the learner negotiate that input so it does enter into the system? So rather than just practice, 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 how is it that you're practicing? Like, is it better if you take both a implicit and an explicit focus on, for example, a particular form that you might be learning? Is that more likely to cause something to go from input to intake? Well, the research suggests that for adults, yes, that's true. Adults are able to negotiate input to explicitly to try and help them restructure their system. And this is this is the second point. So code breaking is this idea of sort of pigeonized output. You know, me, Tarzan, you, Jane, right? You know what everybody's saying, and you understand it, and you can produce it. So it's decoding, right, what's being said. But code breaking is the idea of being able to take that message, whatever that message is, and analyze it down into parts that you can then re-put together so that your accuracy improves, right? So code breaking would be exactly the same as what we talked about with U-shaped learning. Do you remember what U-shaped learning was? Go for it, Diego.
At first, students or learners seem to produce accurate speech.
Yep.
But as they begin breaking the code, their speech seems to take a downturn.
Yep.
In their production. What that is that the students are figuring out those rules and the exceptions.
Yep.
And, like how it's actually supposed to be structured before they can piece it all back together again and produce speech that is correct.
That is indeed perfect. And what data analysis did you look at that?
So first one?
That was the first one, yeah. So that's your example. That's exactly your example of a learner going from decoding to code breaking. So decoding, she and he, it was a little Norwegian kid and a little Japanese kid, was able, it looked like initially, to produce the perfect question. It was question structures or negatives, I can't remember. Questions. Looked like they were able to produce the perfect question. And then as time went on, their question structure kind of sucked. And then if we'd have kept going, it would have gotten better. And that's the difference, because in the first time, they weren't decoding. Okay, sorry, they weren't code breaking. They were looking at it as an entire form, right? As an unanalyzed chunk of language. But in order to complexify your system, in order to restructure your interlanguage system, you've actually got to break the code to be able to re-put it back together and complexify it and produce different kinds of questions, right? So remember that one of the examples was something like, where is this, my doggy, for example. Like, they didn't realize that it's not that slot where the this was is where the direct object can go, right? So they just tagged the direct object onto the end. So as soon as they restructure their system and they realize that the direct object can go there, as well as it could be this, it could be that, it could be my doggy, it could be Lucy, it could be, you know, then they've broken the code and then it goes into the right place, okay? So that's the ability of how the message is put together. And overall, in general, adult learning suggests that adults are pretty good at that they thrive when you give them that, okay? Which again, makes sense of why me and Mark were so crap, right? Because, you know, I remember a code breaking moment where I asked what this stupid little particle was that I had heard for 9 months and I couldn't work out what it was doing there. And someone finally told me what its job was, and I was like, oh my God. So now I knew why it appeared sometimes and why it didn't appear other times. That's code breaking. Now, it may be that affects adult levels of fluency, right? It then takes us longer to process, to move from one kind of less automatic processing over across to more automatic processing, right? So that temporarily causes our fluency to be a bit of a problem, because in Krashen's terms, you're monitoring, right? You've just had this, that would be, Krashen would say that's learned input, and learned input has to be monitored, etc., etc. Now, that's fine. What processing theory says is that, yes, learned input is fine, but there isn't a wall stopping you from turning that into automatic processing, right? Which is would be what I would believe, okay? That as adults, as cognitive beings who've already learned one language, you should be thinking of code breaking very much along the lines of moving from not automatic processing towards automatic processing. Now, don't get me wrong. if we go back to this one, you still need to focus on form, okay? Meaning, you need to focus on meaning and communication based, right? If you just focused on forms, if you just put up the rule, what method of teaching would that be? Yeah, grammar translation. That's absolutely right. Grammar translation just focused on saying, look at that. What's the rule? Here's the rule, right? And we know that doesn't work. Okay, we know that doesn't help you learn to improve your output. So you do have to have that focus on form, that focus on meaning and communication based. But if you only have that focus on form, okay, and no additional negotiation of the input in terms of looking at forms and the jobs that they do, then the chances are that you will end up with pigeonized production. So what's the upshot of all that? Well, you need both, right? The more you can have both kinds of input, the more likely you are to gain proficiency. Because on the one hand, you're complexifying the system and restructuring it, and on the other hand, you're turning that into more automatic processing. Does that make sense? Yep. Yeah. All right, so the argument is in your book that the place to work on this kind of code breaking is between the input and intake, as I just said. So the idea is to really explicitly look at processing the forms themselves, in this case, the form itself. So the example they give you, if all this is sort of being a bit up in the air, the example they give you is on page 421. And what they say is, this is an example from a French causative. So, Jeanne fait promener le chien à Marie. Okay. Which means John makes to walk the dog to Mary, John makes Mary walk the dog, is what it actually means, right? But because in English, we tend to automatically process the first noun as the subject, because that's what we do in English, often this is automatically processed by learners as who's walking the dog? John, right. Right, they will say John's walking the dog because they used to. So if you look above with regard to classroom instruction, Van Patten says that there's three things you want to do to sort of counteract this kind of problem. Give learners information about the structure or the form. So that would be what we've been talking about in terms of telling them explicitly what's going on. Inform learners about a particular processing strategy that might get in their way, which in our case would be, well, if you're English, for your experiences in English, then you're likely to process the first noun that you hear, but you have to wait. And then structure the input so they rely on form and structure to get their meaning rather than natural processing tendencies, right? So you have to have some explicit form focused practice to get them to be able to really practice doing that action, doing that processing. So yeah, and they say the first step is to have learners ask the question, who walks the dog? They respond, the English learners respond that John walks the dog, and so on and so on. So this is when we say communicative-based language teaching, we don't mean, in terms of second language acquisition, we don't mean you abandon all work on grammatical forms. Because what SLA tells us everything in second language acquisition research as it stands at the moment for your standard L2 learner, and here I'm talking about your standard adult L2 learner, suggests that that is not productive, okay? That adult learners need to have some focus on forms if they are going to go beyond that pigeonized early intermediate level, right? Those of you who've been in my TESOL 1 class know that, as I say frequently in TESOL 1, it doesn't matter what method of language learning you use, all of us can get to mid-intermediate, basically, or low intermediate to a function. It doesn't matter whether you use Berlitz or Mango or what's the other one that says that they're perfect that we used to have here until we realized it was crap. Oh, it's the biggest one.
Duolingo?
Huh?
Duolingo?
No, not Duolingo, although that's another one. Oh, it's advertised on TV all the time. Anyway, that,
Stone?
yeah, Rosetta Stone. Rosetta Stone. It doesn't matter what you do. It doesn't matter which of those. All of them can take you to that level. But that is what we call a functional, basic functional level. That if you try and move beyond that, if you're not doing some focus on forms as well, you pigeonize rather than restructure, okay? Again, those of you who've been in my TESOL 1 class, we talked at one point about learners in school who, kids in school who end up with this sort of pigeonized language structure that they then take into college with them because they're never really taught the grammatical forms. So under communicative language teaching itself, grammatical focus is one of the 4 foci. Does anyone remember the 4 foci? This is not in this class, but for communicative competence, there's 4 foundational competencies. Good. Grammatical competence, discourse competence,
Sociolinguistic?
sociolinguistic competence. You guys are doing great, considering it's not even this course. Strategic competence, right? But the first one is grammatical competence. So, yeah, those of you who've been more than one of my class know that I find this is my bugbear, right? Communicative language teaching does not mean there's no focus on grammatical competence. And everything in SLA learning tells us that for adults, it's a mistake not to have some focus on grammatical competence, okay? Because you end up in without a full system. Anybody want to add anything or have any questions to that little speech? No? Okay. All right. So the last thing that your book does is effectiveness of instruction. And I've already just given you the speech that I was about to give you, which is, it depends, right? It totally depends on, now, effectiveness of instruction depends on everything that we have gone through in the last 12 weeks, right? So it depends on who you are. It depends on the outside factors that are important for you. It depends, it might depend on things like your phonetic coding ability or issues like this that we don't know enough about yet, or the non-language factors, right? It also depends on the quality of the teaching itself, right? And that's what I mean by this idea of feedback. The less focused feedback and practice that you get, the less effective instruction is as an adult learner. Let me repeat that because you're all going to be teachers. the less focused feedback and practice that you give inside your classroom, focused feedback and practice, the less effective your classroom instruction is going to be. Okay, so take that away with you. It's my biggest critique when I go see teachers is, what are you doing with the information you're getting in that 50 minutes? Are you listening? Are you giving the students feedback, focused feedback? It's great to have a little fluency activity. That's great. But if you don't put the accuracy there at the same time, you're not doing the right thing by your learner. Now, this one has got nothing to do with that. It's about children learning Chinese, which I thought was kind of awesome. It's in your book for this chapter. And it really shows the difference between being a child, I think, and being an adult, because this is an immersion school for little kids learning English and Chinese. So it's a 4-minute video. So we'll watch the video, and then I want you to tell me if you think this would have worked in an adult classroom, and if not, why not? Okay, so let's see if we can get this to work. Okay, here we go.
From day one, I speak only Chinese to them from the first minute on, and no matter how much they say to me, oh, I don't understand what you're saying, and I don't speak Chinese, I continue to speak the language. Immersion is teaching subject areas through second language. Children learn science and social studies, PE, music, math, all of that is taught in Chinese. I always joke that basically for like the first couple of weeks, I'm talking to myself. Alex, 唔該你隔離啊。不過嗰時，哦 Alex 攞埋你個書包喎，攞埋你啲書包，攞埋你啲食物，攞晒嚟。係啦，係啦，嗰啲係咪你㗎？呢袋咧係咪你㗎？呢個係咪你㗎？係咪啊？係咪你㗎？ It usually takes them about a month or two before they actually start to understand. 或者我放埋呢個先，書包放喺呢度。It takes a few years, sometimes to like the 4th or 5th grade, before they're caught up with their peers in an English-only classroom, and then generally they will surpass their peers. But it does take time, and you have to really believe. 小朋友早晨，你哋可唔可以同我講早晨啊？你哋話周先生早晨。周先生早。哇，小朋友你做得非常之好喎。Eventually, at the end of an immersion program, not only will the child have learned all of the concepts that English-only child has learned in his or her classroom, he or she also will have the benefit of learning, having a second language.
这是需不需要多少？多少？119，哦耶！112，Hi. Oh. Still your name. What? How dare you buy? 我的名字是徐德川，正常。
我的名字叫鲫鱼 ，and my English name is Jay。为什么还不说话？
我现在要特别谢谢大家接待他们的时间，他们的家，他们接待从美国来的上。
你为什么还不说话？是不是你已经害怕？
好似動作作自己係好嘅啫，係嘛？自己
So kind of interesting, right? I think there's a reason I think there's a reason that works super well with children. I'm not so sure it would work well with, what are your thoughts?
My thought is, as you said yourself, adults are conscious, cognizant beings, and
Right.
part of that includes their expected understanding of things. And if
Right.
you put them in a place where they don't understand anything, you could discourage them, frustrate them, or the biggest obstacle that I see is getting them to stick with the program long enough for them to start learning.
Yeah, that's exactly, I thought that was totally summed up by that little boy when he's sort of like, he works out he needs his backpack, and then she's like, oh, and he's like, oh, something else, but he seems fine with it, right? And he takes it over. I think with adult language learners, they would be super frustrated. And I think you're right. I think they would want to communicate their thoughts, feelings, needs, wants before you could give them a chance to do that. No? I don't know. What do you think, you two?
Well, I mean, if you have a class where everybody in the class has a different L1,
Right,
that'd be a pretty good way to solve that problem.
Yeah, that's true.
I think that, I don't think it has to be either or. I think that if I were in a language class, I would really appreciate having a few classes every once in a while that were only in the target language.
Yeah.
Like that, but not every single one.
Right.
You kind of want to do that, and then the next class kind of debrief. Okay, what was that all about?
Yeah, right. Yeah, I think that would work. Totally.
I think I agree with that too. But the thing is, I also believe that it can work. It can work in the sense that, because I've seen it. Yeah, my friend went to Russia, and because she was to learn. She was supposed to one of the law to learn law. Or something like that in the Russian language, and so she went to a school where they didn't allow English at all. So she was just going to, she said for the first couple of months, she was just going to school, like, she didn't get what it was. But eventually, she had to do some other things outside of the classroom. But every day that she went to school, she didn't have the opportunity to, they were not teaching English. She was just listening to everything in the language. In Russia.
Right.
And but eventually, when she came back home, she was speaking Russian like,
yeah,
like she was really so I believe it. But then one of the things that I do get from here is the fact that it will help us to understand when we speak English to our those who are trying to learn English. When we speak English, they will understand the way we speak. Sometimes we are not conscious of the fact that they are learners, that they don't even understand us at all. So that we'll come to that realization that they do not understand.
Yes, that's true. That's very good. Yeah, that's absolutely true. Yeah. So I think, we want to look not only at our intuition on these things, but also at what the SLA research can tell us, you know, about effective ways of learning. All right, good. Well, I think we are done with that chapter. Yeah. So there's no reading post for this week. You are done with those. I have graded everybody's data analyses. I've got one post left to grade, and then you've got your paper. Any questions or comments before I move on to the various surveys?
Regarding the paper.
Yeah.
And forgive me if this is in the.
That's okay.
knowledge, what are the suggested length and number of sources?
I don't think I wrote anything. Oh, did I? Did I put 10 to 15?
It depends on which project you're doing.
Depends on which project.
Let's review.
I think
Yeah.
I said 12 to 15.
Okay.
Yeah.
For both pages and sources?
For sources.
For sources, and then pages just.
Yeah, I mean, I
really do need some more.
yeah, right. Well, and it's a good, I mean, you know, different people in this, if you ask Sal that question, he will be an unhappy man. But I think about this in terms of not exactly page length, but word length, okay? A typical article that you will read in a journal is 8,000 words, okay? So you don't want to be heading for that. That's a lot of work and a lot of, yeah. That's anything upwards of 30 pages, right? A typical book chapter that you read is anything between 6,000 and 7,000 words, okay? Which is more like 20 something. So if you're producing a lot less than sort of 4,000 to 5,000, then you're really not in the zone of really working on a topic, right? So if you're producing somewhere around 4,000 to 5,000 words, you're really engaging in a topic, right? Closer to the 5,000 than the 4,000. I don't know how many pages that is. It's less than 20. Someone look it up on their iPhone. Just put in Google how many pages is 5,000 words. That's what I do. I just put it in Google, and it comes up with an answer. You got anything? Oh, yeah.
About 22 pages is 6,000. 5,000 is about 19 pages.
Yeah, okay. So somewhere between 4,000 and 5,000 is about 15 to 19, something like that.
12.8.
Yeah, 12 point. Yeah. You should always be 12 point, by the way. So that's graduate work, if you like. So it's not as much as a peer-reviewed article. It's not as much as a book chapter, but it's in the zone, okay? Because if it's a lot less than that, it's really undergraduate work, okay?
So ballpark 20 pages.
Yeah, so somewhere between, 15 and 20, basically. I mean, if it's a lot of content, if it's a lot under that, then that's not good, because that's not really graduate work, yeah. It means that either you haven't looked at your sources properly, or you don't have enough sources, or you're not engaging in a engaged graduate way, I guess is the only way I can put it, right? So, and those of you that are thinking of doing PhDs or moving on and wanting to produce this kind of work, then, you've really got to push yourself to produce as much on these term papers as possible, because it's your practice for the end game, which is producing, you know, a full-blown dissertation or thesis text, which, you know, you don't do out of nothing. You know, you sort of have to learn how to create that piece by piece. So partly the reason I dither on this is because it sort of also depends on what your goals are. I mean, if you're never going to write a long piece again in your entire life, then, you know, then okay, I guess it's okay in your own mind to do the minimum. But if you have a goal to keep on trucking in some kind of way, then your goal should be to produce, you know, the best that you can in each circumstance. That's a very long answer to a short question. So obviously it was a good question, Mark. Anything else? Any other?
I just got through writing a 15-page paper for which I was required to have 12 sources, and I was frustrated because I felt like it was really shallow necessarily because...
Right, you could have written more. Yes, yes. And that would be my instinct, that you could have written more, especially when it comes to something like that where it really is something that you're interested in. Yeah. There is a... Sorry.
To me, the hard part is getting the sources.
Right.
If you get the sources, then the paper will basically write itself if you just talk about what's there.
Mm-hmm. Although writing lit reviews is not easy for everybody. It's because you have to work out how to organize the material. You know, the worst lit reviews are the ones that say, and then there was this one, and then there was this one, and then there was this one, and then there was this one. You know, somehow you have to learn how to organize it in a sort of conceptual way, you know.
Because I had Dr. Lee,
Mm-hmm.
and she had me reorganize in that way because what I had done
it's saying then there's this and then there's this, yeah.
Like, I mean, it was very much kind of like a journalist would do. And then I was like, and then there was this guy, and then there was this guy.
Yeah, and then there was this guy, right.
She had me organize it by subject.
Right.
Which was better overall, but it was a little bit difficult sometimes because you'd have to cite the same article multiple times.
Right.
And there were some times when I was saying, oh, and this other guy that I previously mentioned, he also said the same thing.
Right.
So it was a little awkward.
Yeah, stylistically it's more difficult.
Yeah, it was it was a little bit awkward, but overall it was less disjointed.
Yeah. Stylistically, writing lit reviews can be quite a challenge. I just got back a article. It's a very short article, actually. It's called a short research report that I wrote with a bunch of people on this corpus that we have, this corpus of disabled people that we have. And to be honest, I didn't try very hard because it's a short report, which means it's less than 3,000, somewhere between 3,000 and 4,000 words. And I thought the journal would just publish it because it's really about how we made the corpus and everything. But then both of the reviewers, the anonymous reviewers at the end were like, and that last section was really bad. That last section where you said all the research that you'd done based on the corpus, it's just like, and then we did this, and then we did this, and then we did this. And I was like, oh crap, they saw that. Now I'm going to have to rewrite that better. You know, I'm going to have to rewrite that so that it's sort of conceptually driven. And it's like, oh, just the thought of it makes me tired. But the truth is that is a good, you know, a good piece of research work. When people tell me, well, what's wrong with this? That's usually what it is. It's because there's been no kind of organizational structure for the reader to take them through. So, yeah. Any other?
I think this is personal. We don't need to ask a question. Where can one get like a sample of a very good literature review?
That is an excellent question, Tolupe. From the key journals in the field that we have. So you can find literature reviews in TESOL Quarterly. You can find them in Applied Linguistics. You can find them all over. Our main person, the biggest journal in our field, the one that is full of the best examples, Tolupe is also full of fabulous examples of how to use APA, because it's always APA as well, is TESOL Quarterly, TESOL and then Quarterly. And it's completely accessible through the library. And they have examples and examples of how to write really well in our field. They take somewhere between 5 and 7% of the articles that are sent to them. So that's how high the standard is. So they are a great model for you to use, and they have literature reviews all over the place. And often they'll have something that says, you know, feedback in the classroom, a literature review. And so then you can see, you know, how they've put that together. Yeah. Anything else? All right, then you're not done yet. So the first thing is, this is the survey. You can just literally download the link from the PowerPoint or click on the PowerPoint. This is the survey to help us, so our program with our program assessment. So one of the things we're being assessed on is this idea of increasing cultural competence. So cross-cultural competence. So what this survey does is just ask you some questions about how you feel about cross-cultural issues. I did it this morning. It took me 5 minutes. So for non-native speakers out there, it may take more like 10 minutes, but it sure isn't going to take you any longer than that. Okay. Then the one that we're being pushed by the provost's office is these spring evaluations. So course evaluation return in our classes is not good. It's not just us. It's not good across the university. And so they're really pushing us this semester and threatening us with demerit pay if we don't get people to do this. So I am doing as I should, giving you the PowerPoint that was given to me. So all you need to do is, well, first of all, they tell you why you should take them. They're completely anonymous. It takes less than 10 minutes. All I get is the overall scores and comments, but I don't get to see any of the, I don't even get the original forms. That's all taken out. And the reports are used in faculty annual evaluations and tenure and promotion reviews. So if you have something to say about me, that is the place to say it, okay? And I actually look forward to them. I read my evaluations. I like to see what worked and what didn't work, and, you know. So everybody should be checking their email. Those of you who have mobile devices in the room, could you check your email and see if you have something from, quote, the office of the provost in the center name? Thank you, Diego. He's having a look at it.
I had some reviews I've done them already.
You've done them? Okay, fantastic.
Yeah.
All right.
Only this morning.
Oh, great. So you can also, if you can't find them in your email, you can check the My Leo portal. There's a banner on the front page and an icon in the apps, or you can also go to that link that's up there now. It's not in your email. Try the link, Diego. Yes. Okay. And is your class coming up?
I only see the one from my other class.
Oh.
Exactly, that's what I got to. I got to you too.
You didn't get me? Oh, that's not good. Okay. You know what I think that might be? That might be because they've only linked it to the online people and not to you. So I'm glad we just did all this, because now I will go to course.evaluations@tamuk.edu and say that half my class doesn't have access to their. So you don't have access, you don't have access, which means Mark probably doesn't either. Okay. All right. I will deal with that and send you a email and let you know. Okay. I appreciate everybody online filling those out too. And do let me know if you can't get them online, because I think you would be the section that should be able to get them, and it's just my other section that can't. All right. Don't be shy to email me or talk to me in virtual office if you've got any questions. Otherwise, thank you. It's been a pleasure. And I look forward to getting your papers on or before the 10th. All right.
Thank you.
You're so welcome.